Welcome again to the S.E.M podcast. Jack Bryce and Zach Hewlett are back again hosting, and today we're joined by our friend Roy Peckham. Roy, how are you doing tonight?
Good, doing well, doing really
Good.
well.
Love it. What part of the world you calling from?
I'm here in Houston, Texas, so nice and warm.
I'm sure it'll cool down eventually, right?
Maybe.
We hope so. It's been like we had 40 or 45 days of like 100 plus with humidity, and it's been a little rough.
Yikes.
It's all right. We're okay.
Thank heavens for air conditioning.
Oh yeah. It's not optional here. It's required. So
I love it. Well, Roy, we're excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Understand that you've been listening and know the format. So we'll just start out, talk about your experience getting your call, and maybe even before then, and your decision coming out and then coming to Scotland.
Sure. Yeah. So I did. I have been watching it, so I had a few notes here, so I wasn't just completely going into it blind. I guess if you backtrack all the way, so I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in a city called Long Beach, and I grew up in kind of the rough part of that city.
Nice.
So I grew up in South LA, so very diverse community. Little bit rough, but it was still pretty fun. And then went to UC San Diego for school. And I loved UCSD. It was a blast. Living in San Diego, surfing, beach volleyball, not getting great grades, like just living the life. And I was just really kind of happy. I'd made some really good friends, and kind of didn't know if I was going to serve a mission. It wasn't something that was at the forefront of my mind, but it kind of kept nagging on me a little bit. And I had a really close friend. It was someone I really looked up to as a bishop when I was a kid, and we'd talk and we'd catch up and stuff. And he kept mentioning it, and I was like, hey, it's something maybe I should do. So then I was like, you know what, let's just do this. And so I just put the paperwork in, and I kind of said, hey, let's give this a shot. I'll give it everything I've got and see where it goes. And that was my mission, story in terms of like even submitting the call. It was more of a, let's see where this goes. I was in my sophomore year, just hanging out and having a great time, and did it. And then even my call. So my dad, I think I ended up using my home address for the mission submission. And so my dad got the mission call, drove it down to San Diego that night, and we went out and just got dinner. So it was just my dad and I, and open it up. And again, I have no. This is a theme we'll hit on often, is I don't have any sort of like grounding in the culture of missionary stuff, right? So we open this letter up, and it's like, oh, you're going to Edinburgh, and like everybody else, right? I'm like, I don't know where that is, right? And so once we figure out it's in Scotland, and I'm still like, I think I know where Scotland is, and then I start texting my friends, right? And I don't have any LDS friends, and so they're all just like super stoked about the nightlife in Edinburgh and backpacking through Europe and all this stuff. And they're all super happy for me. And I was like, I don't think that's what I'm going to do, but yeah, this sounds fun. And yeah, I mean, no idea what to expect. And then, like I said, I just had this really great network of friends, and they threw this huge party for me back in San Diego. Again, featuring many things you probably wouldn't find at a normal missionary party. So, but nevertheless, a great time was had by all. And they were just really, really supportive. And yeah, there's always a gap kind of between when you get your call and when you actually leave. And so went back to kind of life as normal, living in San Diego. And I was in a pretty serious relationship at the time, and she wasn't a member, but she's a great girl. And we ended up formally breaking up. I drove up to her house in Mission Viejo, dropped her off. Then I drove to my stake president's house, was set apart, packed a bag, and left on a flight the next morning, which I do not recommend that whatsoever. It was a terrible idea.
Talk about ripping the Band-Aid off. Goodness gracious.
So when people ask, like, so like the big story, when I was in the MTC, is I didn't have a haircut. My hair was like down to here.
That's right.
Again, I had no concept of missionaries, and so I thought it was like the Marines. I thought they just shave your head when you got there. And so, and looking back, I feel so bad, right? Because here's this mission president. He's got all these young kids he's got to take care of, and this idiot shows up with long hair, and he's like, now I got to go take you into town and get your hair cut. It's just, yeah, it was a little traumatic, kind of really making a hard shift to doing it. But I was committed to putting the effort in and giving it a shot. And yeah, that was it. And then I was on my way. So that was a bit of a big case. I mean, even my so this is around Halloween, and so my farewell talk, we had we had gone to the Halloween party at UC Santa Barbara, which at the time was like one of the largest Halloween parties on the West Coast. It was massive. And I'm driving down from Santa Barbara, writing my talk, right? It's just, again, like, I remember like when I came home and I was giving my homecoming talk, and this lady like speaks after me, and she's like, I don't even know who this kid is. Like, she's like, I don't even recognize him. And I remember the stake president leans over and he's like, I hope that doesn't offend you. And I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Like, it's very whirlwind, very much not, who knows what's normal, right? But perhaps maybe not what one might assume is a stereotype of how those events typically proceed. But hey, everybody's different. And I was ready to go. MTC was a little rough, but yeah, that's how I got out.
And that was November 2006, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So you came back November of 2008, is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us about what life's been like since you've been home.
Sure. Yeah. So came back on Halloween, like 2 days before Halloween, which is another thing I don't recommend, like going to a Halloween party as a 2-day-old returned missionary. Like, it's just so awkward. Like, you're so awkward. So on my mission, I had transferred to BYU, and I because at the time I left when I was a sophomore, and so many of my friends were looking to graduate, and I wasn't going to come back to what I was doing in San Diego, and so I kind of wanted to change, and it transferred to BYU and applied to their information systems program. Had a couple of months before I started at BYU, and so just hung out, surfed, had some good time in San Diego, and then I drove up to BYU. Like, I was out late the night before, got up early, and just drove to BYU. I'd never been to Utah. Well, I'd been through Utah one time on a road trip with my friends, but I'd never been to Provo. And I drove right past Provo. Like, I thought the town was going to be bigger. So I didn't have a smartphone either, right? Like, I just boom, right past it. I'm in the canyon, and it's late. It's like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, this doesn't look right. Like, something's not right here. And so I was meaning to meet up with John O'Brien, who's a missionary that I'd served with, and he had come home a little bit earlier than I did. And so I'm calling him up, and he's like, "No, you're too far." So I turn around in the canyon, I come back down, and we meet up. But I pick him up somewhere in like those like us off University, up almost towards the canyon. There's like that business park there.
Yeah.
And I picked him up from there, and he's like, I was like, all right, let's go get some food. What's open? And he's like, there's nothing open here. It's not how this town works, right? It's like, what do you mean it's not how it works? and so yeah, we went to the hospital, because that was like where you hung out late at night. Which 3 years later, when I'm having my son in that hospital, and there's a bunch of teenagers in my way, and I'm trying to get some food, it's a lot less entertaining of an experience. But yeah, so did that. I had a dinner there, hung out, and then woke up the next morning, and I'll never forget. I called my friends up, and I was like, I'm living in a farm town. Like, I don't know where I am. Like, this is a terrible idea. like I'm so like, what have I done? Like,
oh man.
But I loved it.
That would be quite a shock. I mean, Provo's not very big in consideration to San Diego.
Yeah, and I was living in LA, right? And so yeah, LA, San Diego, both those, right? And yeah, it's funny though too. So my wife ended up teaching down in Goshen, Utah, and we'd hang out with some of her teaching friends, and they'd be like, "Oh, we don't know if we want to go up to the big city with all the traffic in Provo." It's just like, it's so great. But anyway, yeah. So BYU, just started taking classes there, went through the information systems program, had a great time. I think one good story about that. So this was probably my first weekend in my apartment at BYU, and I had this roommate. I hadn't met him yet. And And he was a real strict kind of guy, but super nice, like loved him. And at the time, Blake Bockholt had just gotten married, and he and his wife were living nearby, and their shower broke. And so Blake calls me up and he's like, "Hey, can I use your shower? Like, my wife and I, our shower's broken. We need a shower before church." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. No big deal." And they come over, they use the shower, and his wife is coming out of the shower. Now she is fully dressed, right? This isn't like a towel situation, but but she's got a towel in her hair, right? Drying her hair. And we're talking. And right then my roommate walks in, right? Never met him before, as this girl is coming out of our bathroom with the towel in her hair. And I'm just like, oh no. And his face goes white. And he's just like, "What is going on?" And I was like, no, it's not. And then, like 2 seconds later, it was totally fine. But it was really funny. I was like, "Oh man, this does not look good." And so, but yeah, I didn't really understand, the ins and outs of that whole system. But it ended up being fine. So yeah, then I started going to school, doing that whole thing. Ended up meeting my wife, Samantha, a few months later in February. So I was her home teacher. And so the same roommate and I, were the home teachers. And, we go to home teacher. I think she's kind of cute. And I told my roommate or my housemate or whatever, I was like, "Hey, do you think it's okay if I ask her out, even though we're, her home teachers?" And he's like, "Absolutely not." And I was like, "All right, I'm going to ask her out." And I definitely was like, I was like, "Hey, listen, I'm your home teacher. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable coming to me for a blessing if this date doesn't work out, but I'd love to take you out sometime." And so, yeah, went out. And then, everybody's always got the ups and downs of when you first start dating people. And we ended up getting more serious about a month and a half later, and dated for almost a year or so, got engaged and got married the following June. And so that was,
Nice.
June of 2010 was we got married.
Okay.
Yeah, stayed in Provo. She was a teacher down in Goshen. I'd been teaching there. She ended up teaching there for about 5 years by the time we left. Got my master's in information systems, did an internship with a place in Utah, and then did another internship at ExxonMobil. And now I work there. So I've been at ExxonMobil now since 2012, so a little over 11 years.
Nice.
I do mostly, it's fun. I like it. I do mostly like strategy and digital work there. Bounced around a bit. I started our design thinking practice and got to travel all around the world. A lot of Asia, a lot of like Australia, Europe and stuff. And then I got to invent some stuff, which is kind of fun. We invented these little sensors that could use machine learning to read tires. And, we're having all these really cool conversations about putting them in gas stations and truck stops. And then, 2019 hits, and that put a stop to extra funding real quick. So then I spent a lot of time in our corporate strategy group, really kind of thinking about and planning for the future of the corporation, like where we wanted to take the company and how we want to really transform the business. And yeah, now I just run a bunch of digital projects and build software, and it's fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. So what else? Cool. Yeah, it's fun. It's a big corporation, which is different. It can be a little stiff. It's an oil company. Not something I ever thought I'd do, but I ended up really liking it, and have a lot of fun there. So I've got 3 kids. My son was born, 4, 5, 6 weeks before we left Utah to come to Texas. So that's Dean. So he's 11. Yeah, it was one of those things where I'm like, you couldn't have waited another couple weeks to get on the insurance. So, because we were in the NICU and all this. He's fine, but it was just one of those things where I'm like, dude, this is so expensive. So, but yeah, then 2 girls after that, Lily, who's 8, and Kate, who's 6. And so, we are deep in soccer, music, band, school, after school, everything. It's a lot of fun living in Texas. It's hot, but we get back to California for good weather, and food's good here. And actually, John O'Brien that I talked about earlier, he's actually moved down here with his wife. So he and I grabbed dinner a couple months back. It was fun catching up with him.
Oh, that's awesome. Love to hear that.
Yeah, pretty I don't know, pretty normal. Got a job. do the stuff. So, Not too
Can you
complicated.
can you tell somebody to figure out the gas prices for us a little bit?
You know, it's yeah, we could get into that. No, it's yeah, I'm with you. It's interesting. I actually end up, you know, I don't want to maybe tell too many employers this, but I end up going to like Kroger or Smith's now because they're discounts. So if we do that like grocery delivery, man, I'll get like $1 off a gallon. It's insane.
I mean, yeah, it
But
makes
no,
sense.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, the gas prices tend to be a bit steep. So, but
No.
we don't actually own any of our gas stations. We sold them all.
Oh wow.
So we do have an influence on it, but we don't set any of those prices because we sold those businesses a long time ago, which is kind of a good idea. But you know,
Yeah, I mean, you just make the gas, you don't sell it. That's fine.
that's right. Yeah, no, and we sell it to whoever wants to buy it. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
good for you. That's like you got a lot of great things going on for you, Roy. That's awesome. Well,
yeah.
take us
All right.
back now to Scotland and start the MTC, or if you want to, you know, jump past that time, you're more than welcome
Yeah,
to go right to Edinburgh as well.
yeah, sure. So sorry, my mic's like wandering around, but we'll get through it. So yeah, let me think. Back to the MTC.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, like I said, so I showed up with you know, with long hair, and so the MTC wasn't my favorite place. So, and I say that delicately, right? Because you know, they run a great program there, and they're all just so nice, and everybody's wonderful, and so it's not a reflection of anything else other than the shock that I was going through at the time. But yeah, you know, we had you know, I was with Jeremiah Johnson was my MTC companion. We were with another guy who I think I know his name, but I don't want to butcher it, so I won't mention it. And all I'll say is, you know, Jeremiah and I we come from very different backgrounds, but we were both very different from this other guy, and I think that like kind of bonded Jeremiah together. And so we both, you know, it was great. He's awesome. I mean, I think you guys, I watched his interview; it was fantastic. But you know, we're in the MTC. I don't know if it's in the MTC or right when we got to the mission home, but someone was talking about Glasgow and just like how rough it was. And you know, my background being from South LA, I was like, oh, that's obviously where I'm going, right? Like, so, and sure enough, right? So yeah, we get the assignments. It's Jeremiah, Demeron Ashton, Stephen Gardner, and myself are the ones coming out to Scotland. And I think Demeron mentioned that, or one of them mentioned that we were one of the last groups to go to that B&B. That now that I think back to it, you know, I was in the office for a while, and it's like I don't know why we ever did that, but you know, it was kind of fun. I guess it was a bit of an introduction into you know, the flats and the apartments and things like that. My wife and I ended up going back to Scotland, I think in 2014, and we stayed at like a B&B like that one for one night. And she's like, "This is weird." Like, yeah, it's a little weird, you know, like the carpet patterns and the shower that's like a tin can. You know, but anyway, yeah. So then, you know, get to the mission home, meet everybody, and then I was assigned to work with Adam Payne as my trainer.
That's right.
Yeah, and Adam is just an awesome guy. Super stoked, great guy. Had a lot of fun together. You know, definitely someone to help me loosen up and just really enjoy my time there. You know, we had a lot of great times. I'd say what was interesting about that time of the year in November is obviously it's just chucking rain the whole time. And I remember we were coming back or going somewhere, and it was raining so hard that we both had like our jackets like cinched to our chins, and Adam's contacts are getting like rained out of his eye because the rain is hitting it, and I was just dying. Like it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Like, so, but yeah, it was good. I mean, I think you probably mentioned we had this guy that we'd meet with named Big Tom, who like, it's funny now, like when I think back to the explanation of why he was the way he was, it doesn't make much sense. But allegedly, like his kitchen exploded or something, and so again, these are missionary stories, you know. And we would eat the same thing every Wednesday, and it was like he couldn't have any like flavors or salt or spices. So it was just like boiled chicken that had been prepared the week prior. But if you stuck it out, he'd give you these giant Magnum bars, which was like, you know, you just had to stick it out. And so what I ended up doing is I would sneak like a little bit of Cajun seasoning or like pepper in my pocket. I'd like put on the chicken. so I could stomach it, But yeah, no, it was great. It was interesting as well. During that time, the mission had this art photographer that was visiting, and he was doing this project on missionaries like around the world. And he took like photos of district meetings and stuff that we were in. And this girl that was going to BYU that I grew up with, she's like texting me, or not, she's emailing me, sorry, emailing me on the mission. And she's like, "Hey, did you know you're in like an art exhibit?" And I was like, wait, really? Apparently they had this big art exhibit and they were putting up pictures. There's one of Adam, myself, and Christian Lucas in there. So, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, something you're like, I don't know, it was really weird, right? And you come back and you're like, oh, that's kind of nice. But yeah, other than that, I think I think there was a lady named Mary who was baptized while we were there. And obviously a wonderful person. I think what I remember most about her though is, like many Africans in Scotland, her apartment was just shockingly warm. And so it was always nice to escape from the bitter Baltic cold to this like brutally warm apartment. But yeah, so that was Adam. And then I think I was with him for 3 months, so 2 transfers. And then Jeremiah Johnson, we were back together, which was just a blast. Working with Jeremiah was absolutely a highlight, right? He's such a great guy and just so fun serving with them. And he's one of those missionaries, you could serve your whole mission with them. I think he told this great story that I want to make sure I like clarify, because I'm not defending myself, because it was hilarious. But what it was is we were in the car, and I actually went to my journal to find this. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but he was telling the story about how the ward mission leader said he was basically stupid, and that's why he would connect with this other guy better. I don't know if you remember that, but he goes, so basically we get this ride, and we just got back from this teach. And the best part about the story is the ward mission leader is trying not to offend me. Right. And so he's saying, oh, Elder Peckham, no offense or anything, but I really think Elder Johnson should do more talking. And this is what he said, because I wrote the quote in my journal because it was hilarious. He said, because he and John aren't, quote, quote, educated, and they both know hard manual labor. I just felt so bad. But it was one of those moments where, like, if you know Jeremiah, he is smarter than I am. That's a fact. And so that's why it was just so funny, because like this board mission leader had just misread the room so bad. And the best part, the best part is he's just saying no offense to me while completely just eviscerating. So
that's great.
Yeah, it was one of those stories, as missionaries, you get a little bit callous, right? But no, Jeremiah, he's, again, we got the privilege of teaching a guy named Malcolm Mathers in Glasgow, who's just this amazing guy that we had met. So many stories about, meeting him and deciding to go, visit him and teach him, and just a lot of really awesome experiences. I think probably one of my favorites was we had invited President Frederick to do a teach with Malcolm with us. And, we thought it'd be a good idea, right? They're kind of like similar in careers and stuff. And we probably spent 3-4 hours preparing this lesson, just really getting in deep and really getting thoughtful and, all this stuff. And then we get there and we sit down and we start teaching. And, we get to that 45-minute mark. And, Jeremiah's crushing it, right? He's just slaying and just doing such a great job. And President Frederick leans back in his chair and he goes, all right, it's been great. Thanks for letting us come. Appreciate the time. And we just pop out of there. And I'm like, man, we got like half the lesson left. Like, we spent a lot of time on this.
Time's up, elders.
No, it was a great lesson to both of us, strike when the iron's hot, and just absolutely the right way to do it. And like I said, serving with him was just an absolute privilege. He's one of those people that, when you like are with somebody and they're just pushing you to be better in a different way than maybe you were expecting. And it's like this give and take. It was just so fun. And we were together for, I think 2 transfers. We had a brief stint where We had a guy join us for a period of time, and that was a lot of fun. I think Jeremiah mentioned Alan Walker. My only memory of him, and I do feel bad because this isn't a flattering memory, but he was super sick when we picked him up. And we got him to our apartment, and he just got off the bus and just yacked everywhere in the street.
Oh man.
And I was just like, "Oh, this poor kid." Like, it was not his day. But he got well quick, and we had a good time. So then, yeah. So after serving with Jeremiah, I went. So we split. I think he became a district leader. I'm trying to remember where he went. Um, and then actually, no. One more thing about Jeremiah. This is just one more thing to make fun of him. We baptized this lady, and her name. So Jeremiah could never say her name correctly, and it always made me laugh. So I always wanted him to say it because it was just so funny. But her name is Patricia Justina Mokonyo Mwatu, and he would get to like the Mokonyo part, and he was like he just couldn't get it out. And I loved it. I gotta get my like my stuff in because he's just so awesome that like nobody wants to touch him, right? So anyway, so yeah, so then we split up, and I went and trained Justin Van Leuven, and we whitewashed back into Partick, and he's just hilarious, right? So much life and energy and vibrancy. Definitely, had a bit of an adjustment coming into the mission. Was a little bit of a frat boy coming in, but he adjusted quick, and everybody loved him. He's just such a great guy. And unfortunately, I only got to serve with him for a few weeks because they kind of split us out again. But I had a blast. Everybody loved him. Yeah, he was just super fun to be around, and brought, like I said, just a lot of intensity and energy to everything. And so then I left Glasgow for the first time. So I'd been in Glasgow for a little over 6 months, mostly in the Knightswood area on the Far East End, and really just spent all of my time there, and ended up really loving that ward, loving that area, just loved it. And then, it's hard though, because, when you go back and visit with your family, when Samantha, my wife, and I went back, I didn't really take her to get Drum Chapel or Bear's Den or Knights. Right? I'm like, yeah, we'll drive by. Like, we're not.
Yeah.
We're we'll look at it from the car. But anyway, so yeah, so then Edinburgh, and went to serve with Alan Slater. Again, someone I was only with for a short period of time. There was a couple of like awkward moves in that transfer. He's a great guy. Had a lot of fun with him. Really, really positive. Just super, super sure of himself, which is always a crack up. Thought he was the best footballer in the world, and I'm sure he was. I was obviously not. So compared to me, he was. And so, but he was just so much fun to be around. Yeah, I had a really good time. Just was only there for a little bit in the Meadows, and then I moved into the office. And so that was, I was almost about 8 or 9 months in. And President had this idea where he wanted to make the office elder the district leader, which he eventually decided not to continue to do. So it was one of those things where it was just a lot. But yeah, so my first companion there was Donovan Oliver. We started in the office. I think he had about like 6 or 7 months left by the time I got with him. And he was awesome. He had such a laid back demeanor that nothing was ever an emergency, right? It was so nice, because I was always stressing out. I'll tell you, like, as a district leader, as an office elder, and as a proselyting missionary, right, your time is like really carved out. And so I'm balancing between managing, my responsibilities at the time were vehicles, which effectively just meant, fielding reports on whatever vehicle Brad Stringfellow had crashed that week, to, doing other things and making sure we had, our stuff in order. Shout out Brad Stringfellow. Yeah. It's awesome. I love Brad. But no, Don, he made it easy, right? And we, I think he was like a baseball pitcher or something. I don't know. He was just super chill all the time. Living in the mission home itself was a little chaotic, to say the least, but a lot of fun. Had made some really good friendships there. We worked really closely with the Boyne family, or Burgoyne, depending on how you pronounce their name. Some people pronounce it that way. So, but anyway, so yeah, I think we baptized one of it was like their niece named Zena, and then a few other people were baptized while we were there. Yeah, he was great. I loved Edinburgh. Right? Edinburgh is just this beautiful, iconic city. Serving right there in the center of it was such a privilege, you know. And then so Donovan, I don't know where he went after that, but I stayed in the district. I stayed in the office, and we brought in Tim Ehat. And Tim and I had some similar backgrounds in terms of technology, so we got on, I think, pretty well, pretty quickly. He's definitely a lot more reserved than I was. You know, I'm a little bit more outgoing. But man, do I have a lot of respect for Tim. He's just an awesome guy. So smart, just like immediately friendly. People loved him. Just a kind person. Loved serving with him. He got along with everybody. I mean, super successful now. It's great family, everything. I'm always stoked to see what he's doing. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun serving with him. And just, you know, again, like I said, he and I kind of just connected, and I think we really fed off of each other really well. And, you know, the same thing with you know, Donovan, like whenever, you know, when you're doing office stuff and district leader stuff and you're living in the mission home and you're trying to proselyte, things go sideways often. And having someone like Tim and having someone like Donovan there that were just super steady and just amazingly just stable individuals who were just really great and loving and kind. I felt really lucky. You know, I was really, really lucky. So yeah, that was my stint in Edinburgh. Right. So I was there, and, you know, we did everything, you know, had all the dinners with everybody. It's so crazy how many missionaries we would have in a ward at the time. Right. It would be like 5 companionships in that little ward. And I remember, I think it was, I don't know, one of the youth, like Joe Mackay or somebody, or Ken Caboyne, and they'd have us go knock on J.K. Rowling's door, right? Maybe, who knows if it was actually her door or not, right? But they always told us it was. So like we'd always go do that, and like they were just such great youth. You know, and like I said, Louis Gaboyne, like he's a character. I don't know if you guys know him pretty well or not. Oh man, you would, trust me. He's a legend. I still get, I don't know, I guess I wore like a tan suit. I mean, I guess that was a big deal for him. Like he continues to make fun of that to me to this day. I'll get like Facebook messages from him. He's like teasing me about my tan suit. And I love cooking. So me, like I would cook a lot. And that's how I would do member visits, right? I'd say, hey, I'll come over and I'll make you some food and invite your friends and we'll have a good time. And he loved cooking. So we got on super well, and would just hang out a lot there and, you know, teach their friends, teach their kids' friends, and just spend time with them. They were just an awesome family in Edinburgh. Chaotic, wild, but just full of life, full of energy, just wonderful people. And one of the first people, like when we came back, and I think we went back in like 2014, I was like, all right, Samantha, like there's a lot of people I want to introduce you to, but we got to get you into this house and you can just like see it to believe it. And like I said, they're so awesome. Right. And I still kind of keep up with them, and yeah, just I got a lot of love for them. That was a blast. Edinburgh was a great time of my life, you know, a great place to serve. And also getting to be around, you know, in the office meant that we were around a lot of other missionaries, around, you know, President and Sister Frederick a lot, seeing them up close, learning from them, just observing them. Great examples they were, you know, just really had a great time. So yeah, super grateful for that. It was chaotic. It was stressful. I remember my exit interview from that position. President Frederick was like, you know, I don't think I'm going to have the district leader be the office elder anymore. And I was like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So, I was like, I don't know. I definitely have gray hair now, but it might have started then, you know. So it was a little rough. But yeah, then I got shipped back out to Glasgow. And Glasgow, you know, we all love, I don't know. Glasgow's a special place, right? It's a rough city, but you gotta love it. And I did. So I was in Springboig with Tyson Bear, and man, was he a blast to serve with. I think it was an early experience with him. He was cutting his hair, and he had like forgotten to put the attachment on. So he like shaved down to the skin, like the whole side of his head, and I just hear like, it's like, ah! So I went in to like check it out. Like, you dying, whatever. And then no, he just, looks ridiculous. And so luckily it was the wintertime. It was like Christmas, right? So he just wore like a cap, like a beanie, and he was fine, right? After a few days. I mean, at missionary, your haircuts are a little rough anyway. So it kind of all washes out, right? And it all washes out. So it was fine.
Time heals all things with
It
hair.
it does, right? And he was, man, we had so much fun. One of the things I really love about that experience, because I think Matt Fissler had trained him, and I think they met the Bowdens. So there's this family there. Catrice, Christy, Samantha was the mom, and then I think it was her cousin Laura Fleming. That was just such a special family. And we ended up teaching and baptizing several of them. And, it was like every Tuesday night we were there with the whole community. We'd cook, we'd just hang out and teach and talk. And it was just such a great experience, getting to baptize them, getting to teach them, spending time with them. Again, those special people, that just you really connect with deeply, and just have so much love for them. They're just wonderful. And again, someone that when we came back and visited, I was like, we got to go cook there, right? We got to get the whole neighborhood over again. And they felt like family. You know what I mean? Like it was just a closeness that I'll always cherish, and just wonderful people. And getting to know their whole extended community and network there was a really special thing. Yeah, and I'll always be grateful for how well they treated us as missionaries, how kind they were. So yeah, it was a special family, a special experience, and serving with Tyson Bear. I mean, it's a privilege in and of itself, right? It was a blast. And then actually, my next companion was probably one of the more different ones in terms of background is Stetson Talbot. I mean, first off, with a name like Stetson, right? I mean, it's gonna be fun. I was actually his trainer, and what a legend he was. I mean, just absolute legend, right? I mean, and I remember it was I think it was one of our first teaches. And when you're training, you're trying to set up something, easy softballs, get them used to it, break it off. And we go meet with this lady, and she's just like, my whole life is falling apart, and she's like, I don't do this. I don't want to do that. And this is falling apart. And I remember thinking like, oh, dang it. Like, just, obviously we're going to do what we can to teach and to share and to testify or whatever. But, this is supposed to be the easy one, right? This is the no brainer. And what was so great about Stetson is that he had such a pure spirit about him, and such a wonderful spirit about him that, he didn't need anything else, right? He just connected with her and started talking to her. And we just had this wonderful conversation. And the best part is he'd think of the scripture, but he didn't really know where any scriptures were. So he's like looking in the index for the page number, right? And trying to find these books. And I was like, I love this guy so much. He's so awesome. And just connected with her immediately. And I was just, he was training me at that point, right? Like it was just awesome to see. I think the best thing about Stetson is his mom was in charge of like some, I don't know, newsletter or email thing or something like that back in their hometown. And she's describing his companion. He's from the big city. You're right. He ain't even seen Lonesome Dove, all this stuff. Which is all true. Like, I had no idea. And he'd ask me all these like country terms and rodeo things. And I was like, bro, I didn't even know this is real. Like I remember my like I said, my wife taught in Goshen, and I would go down on Fridays and like volunteer and help with the kids. And my first Friday down there was a horse tied to a tree outside the school. And I'm like, I must be on a movie set. I'm like, this isn't real. Like, this is fake. And my wife's like, oh yeah. That's like all the kids, when horses like would just run down the street. They're like, that's my horse. That's my horse. It's just, it's a wonderful world that I never knew anything. And I grew up in South Los Angeles, right? Concrete jungle. Just different, hopefully not better nor worse, just, different. Stetson anyway, just so full of love and just genuine kindness. everybody loved him instantly. He was so much fun to be around. We did end up serving with another elder for a brief period of time, and this kid, he had some struggles, he had some hard times, and he and Stetson got into it a few times. Not Stetson's fault. But I give credit to Stetson for really being patient in times when it was difficult. And I just love messing with him all the time. Like, he was so funny. He always had these Snickers bars, and I'd like surgically remove them from their casing and like inflate it and tape it so that he'd think you'd have this. So he'd come, you'd come back on a long, cold, brutal winter day, and he's like, he this is what every night, right? He'd have his Snicker bars laid out, and he'd come in and go, "Hello, girls." So, and then he'd take a Snickers bar and eat it. And I remember the times that I could trick him. It was just the funniest thing in the world. Yeah, so great. I mean, we had some struggles. I remember we were teaching this family, and there was something that happened, and they weren't able to meet with us anymore. And it was one of those days where, just one thing after another, right? Everything just falls apart. And I'll never forget. We're sitting somewhere in Royston, and which is a funny name, right? And we're sitting on like this, this kind of flat that had been bulldozed, and it's all dilapidated, and our entire teaching pool had fallen through. It's baptism of candidates not happening, and we're like, shoot. But I think, what was great about Stetson is he was one where he's like, let's get to work. We just square the shoulders, face the wind, and go. And again, I just learned so much from him, and so grateful to serve with him. It was so fun too. He invited us out to their wedding when he and his wife got married. And I just loved it, right? They had like this whole country theme. Their cake was like a wagon wheel. And, for me, I mean, I don't know what your guys' background is. For me, that's just like so foreign, right? And just so fun and awesome. I think I actually went with Jeremiah at the time. And anyway, it's just love serving with him. So fun. And, that area is so special, right? It's such a unique part of Scotland, such a unique part of Glasgow. Super, super grateful for that. Then I kind of left the city for good, and got shipped down to Irvine, in the Paisley zone I think I was a zone leader or something like that down there, with Chris Frainer. And so, it's kind of released from the city life. I'd spent my time bouncing between inner city Glasgow, inner city Edinburgh. And I'll just never forget, being on the train with like my hands to the window, like my face plastered, like trees, grass, all this stuff. Like, I was like, it's real, like it's a real place. Because I had spent almost a year and a half just in the dense sort of city, loving it though. I mean, I grew up in cities. I was no big deal, but really loved it. And Chris and I got on super well. I think one of my favorite experiences that he and I had is we got on these bikes, and there was some companionship up in Paisley that needed them. And, our miles were kind of running low in the car, and it was a P day. And we're like, let's just ride our bikes to Paisley. So we got up super early and left Irvine and rode like 30, 35 miles. And it was so funny because this is, we didn't have smartphones. So we have like these little maps. And, sometimes there's a road drawn on the map, but somebody decided to put a farm there, right? So we're like riding, and it was super fun. It took us, I don't know, like 6 hours, and I remember getting there and dropping them off and just took the train home. And it's just one of those things where it's like a lot of fun to be with somebody that we got on with really well, and really had a great feel for where he wanted to take the zone and how to do it. And in that area too, it's just so many fantastic people down there. The stake president at the time was Doug Yates, just a really great guy. I spent a lot of time with him. Every Sunday we just meet and talk and share ideas, and we're just really close, really close connection to them, and a really great working relationship. That Irvine ward has such a cast of characters. The Wild family. David Wild at the time was a young teenager just coming into his own. Music, art, just craziness. I don't know if you guys serve down there, but yeah, just a unique area. Different. I mean, we would go down to like Stranraer, which is a really wild place because it's so close to Ireland that they have like this Scottish Irish accent. that is just bizarre. Like I thought, like, Motherwell Glaswegian accent was bizarre. This is a new level.
Wow.
Yeah. So then, I don't know if Chris went home. I don't know. He might have gone home from there. And then I started serving with Chad Peckham. Another just super fun. We had all these dumb games we would play, with like the dictionary at night, just to like. It's not like a smart thing. This is just being stupid, right? Just like somebody you could just goof around with, right? That's what I love. Chad is so great, and we had this great experience where, we were coming home one night, and we got a call from the assistants, and it was like, I think they asked like, how many people can you? He might have told the story. How many people can you guys invite to be baptized tonight? And we're like, well, we're currently driving home. I think we just said, I don't know, 10. I don't know. We said some number, and again, I may be misremembering, but I think I have the gist right. We just kind of pulled into the first neighborhood we found, parked, and got out of the car and started knocking doors, and I think 3 of those people got baptized. Like, wow. It was crazy. And so Sarah Lamon was a girl. Her mother ended up getting baptized, Janet later, and a guy named Jamie Cullen. And just the Lamons were another family that we really just connected with. The mom was just wonderful, really kind, thoughtful, caring. Just great to be around, and integrated well within the community and within the ward and the youth program and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of fun. I think he probably shared the story of the crashed airplane. So there's this hill in this little town north of Irving called Largs, and I was on Google Earth one night, or I guess I don't know when. Like I had one P day, I guess. And I keep forgetting. I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't be text messaging, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so used to having like everything right here. So anyway, so on Google Earth, and I'm looking at stuff, and trying to find, well, what are we going to do on P Day? And I find this crashed airplane, and I was like, well, let's go check that out. And so we went with I think the state's president's son was with us, and another companionship. And I think we had been before. I don't remember, because I know Chad and I went, and then I know we brought other people with us to go check it, because it wasn't far. It was like you park, you drive like 20 minutes, you park, and you walk like 45 minutes, and you're there. And but this time, we're dumb kids, right? And the fog closes in on us, right? And there's a dense fog. And the only issue is if we walk the wrong direction, I mean, it would only be like 20 miles, but like we would eventually hit civilization. Like we wouldn't walk like into the highlands, right? Like it's like it's a peninsula, so we would eventually hit it. But it's like, it would have been a good 15 or 20 miles of walking in the wrong direction. And I just remember like none of us had any idea where to go, right? Like we had this thing where we were just kind of scrambling around, and we're like, okay, we're like praying and doing all this stuff. And we had this moment where we're like, let's just, each of you kind of think of where you think we should go to get back to our car right now, and just take a second and then point in that direction, right? Like 1, 2, 3, point, and we're all like, pointing different directions.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, it was bad, right? Because we're with this member son. If it's just the missionaries, we could tough it out, right? But we're like, oh, this is not great. And I think one of the missionaries was having a pretty hard time with it. He's like, let's call the police. And I was like, it's fog. I don't know what you're going to tell me. We're just out here. And I think the idea, he might have talked about, the idea we had was we would have one person walk as far as they could walk till they were barely visible, and then they'd stop. And then the next person would walk, and the next person. So we just created this line of people, and then we just started like rotating. And eventually, over time, we found this rock fence that we recognized. And then we made it back to the car. And there's this great picture of us coming back to the car where everyone's like, you could see the relief on their faces. It's just like, because for me, Chad and we're like, just, we don't have to make a bunch of phone calls, right? Like we don't have to deal with a bunch of paperwork or phone calls or different things we have to deal with. It was just like, but anyway, those are the things, the trouble you get into, right? Is getting lost in the fog. Not a big deal. That's a great community too. Like I said, the youth in that ward were hilarious. They're always playing tricks on us. We would come home from our flat. There would be like toothpaste on the mirror, and they'd throw our scriptures out the window as we were driving. So, just incredibly annoying, but at the same time, they're kids, right? Whatever. We're kids. We were just having a good time. I do remember the bishop at the time. So I think this was with Chad. It might have been with Chris Lee. We were we were playing soccer on Saturdays, right? And we'd have like 6, 8 companionships, 10 companionships on a Saturday morning playing soccer. And I remember, I talked to the bishop. I was like, look, man, like, we're not doing this, right? There's too many. Like, this is like my whole zone is playing soccer for 4 hours on Saturday morning. Like, this is not good, right? I'm losing a lot of opportunity here. And he screamed at me like you wouldn't believe, man. It's just like, he's like, I need them there. And then it was funny because I was like, and it's just his personality, right? And I think some people were kind of taken aback by it, and we were buddies the next week, and it was fine. And I compromised. He gave him a few companionships, but not quite the whole zone. But it was one of those things where you're just like, I don't know, it's life, it's culture, right? It's part of it. But yeah, that was, like I said, a lot of interesting experiences teaching the Lamans, teaching Jamie Cullen, traveling out to Greenock and just being there in that area was a blast. And then my last companion was Chris Lee. And they used to call him Captain Lee, which I never really understood, I think, because he was a little bit strict and a little stiff when he came in. So again, the youth, like I said, the youth kind of ran the show there. And they came up with nicknames, and they were fun. They were good kids. They were just a little wild. And but Chris, he was great, man. I mean, we got to teach a really interesting people and baptize a few people. It was a lot of fun. Again, just someone who really deeply cared about serving a mission, and was so incredibly focused. And he was actually there. So I ended my mission by being hospitalized. And so he was there. Yeah, it was crazy. So I woke up. Yeah, I woke up one morning, and I still have residual impacts from it. So I woke up one morning, and I just wasn't like feeling right. Like my head was a little bit off. And Chris Lee and I aren't geniuses, so he's like, "Oh, just take a shower." I was like, "Oh yeah, just take a shower. Yeah, that's all I need." And so take a shower, drink some water. Still not feeling great. And it's like a zone conference or a district meeting or some meeting, right? We're at the church, and I'm up next to speak, and I go to stand up, and I'm like, man, I do not feel right. And I go outside, and the whole earth just goes whoop and just flips upside down on me. And I run inside, and I just puke for like 40 minutes in the bathroom, right?
Oh,
and I'm spinning upside down, and Chris Lee comes in, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I don't know what I said. No, obviously. And bless him, man. Like I picked up a trash can, and I would take like 4 steps and just vomit again because my equilibrium was gone. It was completely gone.
Wow.
And he got me in the back of the car and just booked it to the hospital. And I'm just, chucking at whatever's dry heaving, right? Because I can't, nothing's going. And they get me in the hospital, and they take me in, and they hadn't seen anything like this. So it was this moment where like I'd finally kind of calmed down a little bit if I didn't move and stayed very, very still and closed my eyes. So I'm like laying in this hospital bed, and this doctor brings all these like residents in, and he's like, "Well, we think he has a disease called labyrinthitis. If you'll notice, if he starts to move, his equilibrium will go off balance. So, sir, can you please sit up?" And I was like, "I don't want to." And so I sit up, throw up everywhere. and he's like, "All right, just wanted to make sure." So, crazy.
It's messed up, man.
Treat you like a lab rat.
For a moment, right?
Man.
Whatever. Maybe they really don't see that very often, so I guess maybe it's good for them. But anyway, I mean, it was not life threatening. It was just this inner ear infection that like totally screwed up my ear, and so I was there for I don't know a few days. And I remember I get like phone calls from like my parents and from mission president, from I think Jeremiah and Demeron were the assistants at the time. And they're calling me like, "Dude, what's wrong with you?" Like, don't die. And so they just pumped me full of penicillin or something. And eventually I was able to walk. And so I mean, it sucks, So I have like 80% hearing. I have tinnitus, and if I sleep on my left side, I get dizzy. But other than that, it's not a big deal. It's just it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's fine. It's just annoying. It's more annoying than anything else. But it was one of those things where I'm like, well, this isn't how I expected this to go down. And so,
Golly.
yeah, it was crazy. It was I was a little bit nervous at first because I'm like, is this my life now? Like, is this going to come back? And so far, so good. I think it just depends. If I'm like super tired or go to a concert, then I get little symptoms that flare up. But yeah, no. And I mean, I gotta, again, credit to Chris. I mean, he acted quick. He was great. He ran things while I was out, and he's just another one of those. I feel. I mean, I wouldn't say blessed would be maybe a bit inconsiderate to say. I think I'll just say I felt really lucky to have such great companions. And I'm sure everybody says, I'm sure many people say something similar. But I really do feel fortunate. I got to serve with so many men that I really look up to. And it always felt like I was catching up, they're just great. And I learned so much from them. And they, I didn't really have LDS friends, growing up or even before my mission. And so, these guys that I served with, it was, eye-opening to me to meet people like them, and to have friends like them. It was a really special experience. And yeah, that was it. Then, we did the whole thing and go up the top of Arthur's Seat or Pratt's Hill and say goodbye and fly home. But yeah, it was just great. It was great to finish with Jeremiah, Demeron, and Stephen. It's just a great little group we got to start with. And I've been kind of close to them over the years and catching up with them and keeping in touch. Yeah, loved it. It was a wonderful experience.
Man, that was a pretty incredible lineup of people that you served with. I cannot.
That's why I like I said, I don't want to say blessed because I don't want to indicate that I had any preferential treatment in any way. But I think, I always say, like, I don't make a lot of great decisions and I'm not lucky in everything, but sometimes I get lucky when it counts. And I think in this way, I really did. I was just really fortunate. And also, I was there for President Frederick's entire experience, and he's just such a great guy. And I didn't know the ones before and or after. I'm sure both of them are fantastic, wonderful people as well. But I had a tough time early on, and I really struggled, and he was really there for me in a way that I'll always be grateful for. And so were all of these guys. They were really there for me, and just really loved all of them, and had a great experience. And again, I felt really fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any particular or specific memories that you have of President and Sister Frederick that come to mind as you think of them?
Yeah, definitely. So I think he was so funny. I'll share maybe one or two. He would drink this ridiculous drink. I don't know if you guys knew this. It was like apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
Do you know this story? Like cayenne.
We've heard it.
Did you ever try it?
No, not.
So
I was not so privileged.
Oh, so his kids, some of his kids were visiting, and they're like, I was walking by, right? I was just walking by, and they're like, "Oh, Elder, you should try this," And I was like, "Yeah, I want to be tough. I'm a cool guy, I want to show President I'm cool."
No.
And so they like make this concoction for me, and I like one of them got a trash can. She thought I was gonna throw up. Right? I'm just like dry heaving, and I'm just like, "How the heck does this guy drink this? What?" Like it just, he's an enigma, right? I think one of my other favorite, just funny stories of him, and I think what was great about both of them is they were so genuinely optimistic. And they conducted everything with the sense of optimism that was infectious, right? And I really appreciate that about him. He would do this drawing of Scotland, and then he would draw this big kind of like circle around it, and he would put South America on the circle, and he'd say, because Scotland wasn't at the time known for being a high baptizing mission, right? And he's like, well, this may be bit out of sync with geology, but I don't know if people in Scotland know it, but they're South American, so we should expect numbers somewhat similar to South America.
Gosh.
And it was a wonderful way of framing, right? And I think for him, he had such a powerful way of reframing things, right? And he had such an optimistic outlook that for him, he's like, yeah, why not? Why couldn't we achieve this? Why couldn't we do this? Right? There's nothing stopping us. And I think that was something to me that I loved about him. And also that I always felt that he genuinely cared. He had a depth of caring that seemed incredibly sincere. And we knew that they were making sacrifices. They had a son, I think, that was on a mission at the time, and lots of other, things going on. And also being in the mission home, I got to see how much it affected him in an emotional way, in terms of how much he just really deeply cared. I mean, he was all in. And I think as a man and as a person, I learned a lot from him. And I do really credit him in many ways, for just many of the lessons that I've attempted to internalize. You know what I mean? I just, yeah, just a great guy and a great example. So yeah, I could talk forever. I again, really, when I got to Scotland, and I would always remember, I was like, "Hey, President, I don't know if this is for me. I don't think this is my deal." And he's like, "Yeah, you'll be fine." It's like- and, and it was funny because it was never a moment where, he's like, "I'm going to chain you to this chair," right? It wasn't that, but it was one of those moments where I was like, "Yeah, I will be fine." And it was just, he just had that charisma, but it was sincere. You could feel that he loved you. And I think that made up for so much. And that made, Scotland's, it's a tough place sometimes, right? It can be cold and wet and scary and unfriendly at times. And I think that for many of us, there was a deep bond and a deep connection, within all of that. And I think it was really spearheaded by him. So yeah, I give him full credit for that. He's a great man.
I love it. Great tribute to
Yeah, yeah,
Roy.
for sure. Yeah, no worries.
I'd love to ask your perspective on the term that's been thrown around that is hammer time.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I can talk about that.
All right.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, that's one of those things where it's like, too much chocolate cake, right? Like a little bit of chocolate cake is just the best thing in the world, but if you eat the whole dang cake, it's not good. So hammer time, I don't know, as I was in the thick of it, right? And I don't know when and where it exactly got started. I could name some names, but I don't know that that'd be appropriate. The reason it started was a sincere desire to be better. And when we would do early on days, it was, let's pray about this person. Let's really think about what we could say about their teaching, their behaviors, or whatever that would genuinely help them improve. And let's be considerate. Let's talk about this. Let's be thoughtful. And we're not going to be mean. We're going to show love immediately afterwards. We're going to show love before. And we're going to do this, but we're going to be honest and we're going to be as vulnerable as we can, because we felt that if we did all of that, that there would be things that people just didn't know, right? They're like, "Oh, I didn't know I did that," right? And that was our idea. We're like, that was our image of this person wasn't, this person is screwing up intentionally. It's, this person just doesn't know, right? And if we just point it out to them in a loving way, then they'll know. And that's fine, right? Psychologically, I'm not a psychologist, right? But I imagine that's maybe not super healthy for everybody, right? And I think what we were doing was projecting what we wanted, which was, these are like type A people who want that harsh feedback, and like, "Yeah, let's go. I got it. Let me fix this," right? And I think arrogantly assuming that everybody would appreciate that gift in the same way. And maybe not arrogantly, might be a little bit too rough, but I think when we did it, we were not as thoughtful, right? And so I think what ended up happening is it over time morphed into this thing where you would just berate somebody, and that's not cool, right? And I think we also got to a point where, people were being kind of aggressive. They were taking things and saying you shouldn't have this, stuff like that, and it just got out of control. I hope, I don't know of any like confirmed like anybody was actually, physically abused or anything, but I do think that it was, for the wrong person, it was really detrimental. And I definitely, I know that Jeremiah and I had some good long chats about this towards the end of our missions, and had a lot of, because then it got into, this whole idea of being kind of aggressive towards even members, like calling out members and calling out people, and kind of trying to be this angel of retribution, which is
Right.
just not good, right? And I think what had happened is it just kind of got away from us, and it kind of snowballed, and I think many of us were a little bit regretted it, and I remember even coming back from my mission, I'd have missionaries come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry for what I did in that moment," and I think at the same time, you got to realize these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Our brains have years before they're fully formed emotionally, right? We're not even close. And so I think looking back on that, obviously we would have done something different, right? But yeah, it was, I have a lot of thoughts on it, right? I think there is some good there. I think ultimately, if I could go back, I wouldn't have done it, right? I think ultimately it probably caused more harm than good. But at the same time, I remember these meetings. I remember like sitting down. I remember we did one with like Quinn or somebody, and we were really like prayerful about this and thoughtful and trying to think of like what's really going to help this person improve. But again, like if it's not done that way, or even if it's just the wrong person, the wrong personality type, it would destroy them. And I remember even, I had a really humbling moment where I think I was a zone leader at the time, and this guy, I don't remember his name, but he was just crushing it, right? Constantly killing it, always awesome, just killing it. And I didn't spend a lot of time with him, right? Because I'm like, he's got it. And I remember we had this one-on-one interview, and he just opens up and he's like, you spend all your time with everybody else, but you never talk to me. And that was just like, oh man, it just killed me. I'll never forget that moment. I felt, that big and just right to the heart. And those were kind of the turning points for me, and how I started to think about my time and how I teach, and you know what I mean? It kind of helped me think. And I mean, if we look at, I think the life of the Savior, I think, we can all draw whatever comparison we want, but ultimately, yeah, he did throw a few people out of the temple, but I don't think I would define his ministry as hammer time. And so I think if that's our goal as missionaries, then it was probably not for the best.
Yeah.
So, but I don't really have any lingering judgments on anybody, because again, and I trust me, I got hammered plenty. So, like, this was plenty, like plenty. I was not. There were no respites for me. But again, I look back. This is, for many of us, 20 plus years, 15 plus years. We're kids, and I think it's okay. And I don't think anybody was trying to be evil or anything. It's just doing what we did. And I hope that it didn't cause any real sustained harm to anybody. If it is, I obviously feel terrible about it in many ways. But at the same time, I look back on it and say, it's what we did. And for many of it, as much as I could tell, it was attempted to do with love and kindness and care. But I think for the wrong person and the wrong scenario, and if it was missing that piece of it, wouldn't work. So yeah, sorry, I could talk about this forever too. It's something I had a lot of. I was in the thick of it, man, right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well,
too much chocolate cake. I like that.
Yeah, maybe chocolate cake. Maybe it's just a punch in the face. You can take one punch in the face, but
just getting drubbed is a different story. I like that perspective of it though, right? Because like for me, one of my closest companions was Brant Peacock.
Oh yeah.
And Brant and we've talked at length about this, because I left January of 2007, so pretty close after you came into the mission.
Yeah.
And I kind of missed all of that. That was kind of that transition period.
Yeah.
I was there in leadership for the first 6 months of President Frederick, and there was a lot of things that were changing at that point, but it hadn't got there yet. And so to hear hear Peacock's perspective of it and the things that he experienced, he was not that type A person who wanted to be berated or told
I know.
how to be or what to do or those types of things, and it had an effect on him. And so I'm sure he's not the only one. And we've talked to a number of them that have said their 2 cents on what Hammer Time was to them.
Yeah.
But this is why this podcast has been so therapeutic, I think, for many through that too, that like you said, we're all young kids at that point in time. We really didn't know a whole lot of what life was like, and
we didn't know anything.
we ruled the world of the Scotland Edinburgh Mission at that moment in time, and that was kind of it, right? So
no, I appreciate you bringing it up. I think as well, like it. Yeah, I think as you grow older, right, you realize that the way you see the world may not even be the right way to see the world, right? And it's certainly not the way everybody else sees it. And you realize that it takes a kaleidoscope of people, to run the world. It takes all kinds. And I think was the biggest downside of it, is that when you go to Hammer Time, it was a hammer looking for a nail, right? And everything looked like a nail to us, and that was the problem. And I think looking back on it, that's exactly the perspective I think that would have really saved us, is recognizing that this is not going to work on some people, and in fact, it's not only not going to work, it's going to make it worse. And I do genuinely recognize that. And I think, and I do remember, like I said, I remember having these conversations with Demer and Jeremiah towards the end of our mission, and just being like, and it was something, it had just gotten away from us, right? And we'd see these young missionaries just blasting stuff and just being like, it's not good, man. It's not, you don't want to brag about that. Like, I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you bringing it up. And I hope my perspective is one that's, maybe a little bit helpful, or at least, kind of explain, what I saw and how we see it. And also, if you got to remember too, like, we're all trying to guess what President Frederick wants, right?
Yeah.
We see this guy that's like pretty direct, but caring and loving and pretty solid. And we're like, oh, let's just do that, but to the extreme, So, and it's just, I don't know. I try to look back with as much generosity as I can, and hopefully express as much, thoughtful remorse about some things, and also just hope people that were affected like him are in a better place, and that I think we can all realize that, again, we were kids, we were kids.
Well, and my point too beyond that is, after your time kind of came to an end, it shaped the culture of the mission from what we heard from other missionaries. And if you listen to those that are after your time, the level of strict nature of what the mission was that way until the missions merged with Ireland.
Wow.
And so we've talked with some of the younger missionaries who came in, and they had their suitcases raided to make sure that there was nothing that was there, right? But that was the culture of the mission. And no pink ties, and your tie had to touch your belt. Like, those were the rules that evolved from some of these, the higher level, the higher plane of thinking, I suppose. And
I mean, if you get into it, that's there are a lot of like psychological and sort of human traits at play there, right? So there's this idea of the more intense we make the acceptance criteria, and the more that I can demonstrate that I meet those acceptance criteria, the more that I can sort of elevate myself as someone who is, true. And, it's actually the only true Scotsman, or the one true Scotsman fallacy, or something like that. Like, we're just, and I think I think an anthropologist would just go to town on that, right? Because they'd be like, this is exactly what I would expect to happen, right? So, like,
the ebbs and flows, right?
Oh yeah, and I honestly, I think if you have any anthropology friends, tell them that story, and I guarantee you they'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? It's just, and that sucks, man. And I think I remember that, like, I had this like journal or something that like a girl had sent me, and someone like threw it away, right? And I remember like, and admittedly, this girl, I hope she's very happy in her life. I don't know I don't even know where she is now, right? But at the time, it meant something to me. But I remember same thing, after the mission, coming home and someone being like, "Hey, that wasn't cool, and I'm sorry." And that meant a lot, though. It meant a lot, and I just, yeah, it's what's so frustrating, right? Because, and I think what's hard is for those of us who were at the genesis of this, I think we would like to sit in this ivory tower and be like, "Well, you just weren't doing it right. That was the problem," right? And that's obviously not true either, right? And so I think it's just, to me, that's just human behavior. It just happens. And I think that ideally, we study the teachings of Christ and what he taught, and we get to a point where we realize that, while this might be seemingly effective, there is a higher law, right? And there's a better way. And hopefully, I'm really sad to hear that. I didn't know as much about what had happened after we had left, but that doesn't surprise me. Put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm happy to hear that. It just doesn't necessarily surprise me, given what I understand about societies and cultures and how they evolve and change. So.
Yeah, but on the other side of that too, Roy, the thing that we've heard too from these conversations is that elevated time where missionaries were kind of like laying the law down on people and caused some separation between missionaries and the wards they were serving. It allowed the new mission president to come in, not very long after you went home. I mean, 7 months or so, and survey everything and go, let's flip this on its head and show an increase of love.
Perfect.
And it brought the mission back to where it needed to be.
Yeah.
Even though there was still some high standards, like there was a better emphasis on doing it in a way that Christ would do it, not as the level of, overarching perfectionism, but pushing the love and the charitable aspect of the Savior. And I think that helped people kind of come back to the support of the mission. So
that's so fascinating. Yeah,
it is.
And I mean, I'm just so happy to hear that. Right. It's just, we're complicated little creatures, right? And we just, we don't know everything. And I'm glad that happened. And I really do. I really do feel that some people were hurt by it, and that's, it's not cool. So it's tough.
But again, the other thing too is some of those younger missionaries we've talked to that had a sour taste in their mouth after their mission because of that.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast has allowed them to realize that there were still fun moments in their missions. That, some of us, we focus on the thing that is the most intense in front of our face in the moment in time, right?
Yeah.
And we forget to look at the periphery. And we got to spend 18 months, 2 years in one of the most incredible lands in this world.
Yeah.
And interacting with incredible people. Not only just those in the wards and the branches that we served in, but like just people in general. Apart from a few specials, the Neds, once in a while, but for the most part, people are kind and genuine and just
no, I'm with you. I'm ride or die Scotland. One of my friends went to Ireland recently. And he's like, "Oh, would you ever go to Ireland?" I was like, "No, I'm not interested." Like, I have zero interest in going to Ireland. Like,
I'd have the same.
It's ride or die, man.
I would say the same thing. I'd be like, I'm this close to Scotland. Why would I stop there? I'm going over the puddle.
I'm sure it's wonderful. Like, I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm sure everyone there has great food and it's all nice. Zero interest. Anyway,
I love it.
That's good. That's great. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I think, I mean, I definitely think we all hold on to a few of the negative memories of the hammering. I will say I do have a few positive ones, but I do also think that's a function of my personality. And it's also a function of me being really at that early stage. But I do have some positive memories of it. But I do have, like I said, please don't think that I was immune to a relentless besiegement of hammering throughout the later half of my mission. It was definitely something that came often. But yeah, I'm glad. I am glad to hear that that this has helped people. I think the work you guys are doing is just fantastic. I think it's so fun and such a unique thing to be able to have these conversations. And it was so fun for me, like breaking out the stuff and putting some notes down and just remembering all these great individuals I got to spend time with. You're absolutely right. I think a mission is it's a lot of things, and I think that's the hard thing about a mission is it's a lot of things. And I did have tough companions. I did have some issues, and we did have challenges. But I think I am grateful for it. It changed my life, 100% changed my life. And I will always be grateful for I will always be grateful for serving a mission. I will always be grateful for that. So yeah,
that's awesome. Well, Roy, I'm looking at your list of companions. You've got some great ones we haven't talked to yet. Are there any of those that you want to call out, shout out, and any other missionaries beyond those that you served with that you just want to put them on blast a little bit and tell them that they need to step up to the bar and get on the S.E.M podcast?
I think Timmy Hat would be one that's just hilarious. I don't know. Did you guys have Justin Van Leuven? I was looking. There's another elder with the last name of Van Leuven. But
yes, I have been in touch with Justin, and
cool,
he keeps kicking the rock down the road a little bit. So if you want to reach out to him and let him know that,
I just might. And then Stetson Talbot. I mean, he's an absolute riot. I love that guy. That guy so much. Like I said, he'll send me these just random Facebook messages that are just so funny. He's like, "Oh, I was thinking about you. Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, man."
I love it.
He's great guy. Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, the rest of them are all great. I think those two are two that came to mind. But you've already spoken to so many of them. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I had a great time, and like I said, I lived in the mission home, so I was right there for all the elders that were in that mission home at the time, and we served closely together and had some good times, had some tough times, but got through it all.
Oh man, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Roy, we want to express to you our love. We're so grateful that you're one of our brothers in Scotland. Thank you so much for taking time, not only to do this conversation, but to do some prep work too. I mean, taking of your valuable family time to get through the journals and probably the tea books and all the other fun things that you had as your notes. So we appreciate you. We love you, and know that we're here for you as your brothers. If there's anything that we can ever provide to you, please let us know. We would be happy to do so.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I just can't say enough good things about you guys. I really appreciate what both of you do. This is great.
Thanks, Roy. Appreciate you. All right. We'll say cheerio then. Cheerio, mate.
Take care, guys.
All right. Bye.